ஒரே ஒரு 5 லிட்டர் இதய மந்த்ரா கடல் எண்ணெய் பேக் ஒரு மாசம் முழுசுக்கும் அத்தனை சமையல முடிச்சு விடலாம். இதய மந்த்ரா.
आवश्यकता है तो I'll try in Hindi, particularly after a very scholarly presentation by Sri Shankarananji. For me to talk on Pandit Deendayal Upadhyayaji's integral humanism, the organizers have thought it fit to make me talk on work, wealth, and well-being, a people-first economy as a topic. But before that, I will like to say a few things which are very important for all of us, because I understand in the audience largely people from the BJP or from related Sansthan are all present. So you are very familiar with Panditji, but yet the more you read him, the more I think we'll be well rooted into the ideology of the party. And I appreciate the effort taken by the organizers to get this 2-day seminar going, focusing on Pandit Deendayal Upadhyaya. And from all over the country, many of you have come. I'm sure I have benefited when I was in the party full time and much before I entered into the government by such seminars, because they actually open up a lot more ideological strength for us to understand and take forward. So I honestly wish that every one of you all will take these sessions with great seriousness, because it is something which will stand by us as party's karyakarta. Why is it that we're having this seminar today and tomorrow? Actually, in April 1965, Pandit Deendayal Upadhyaya ji had given a lecture in Mumbai, beginning 22nd and going up to 25th, meaning 4 lectures were delivered, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, and 25th, in which he actually explains the idea of integral humanism. And even as I think this book is available for all of us to get a copy, the 4 lectures are nicely printed there. For those of us who can get worried about the huge integral humanism, this small book, which is there on your table, I think, gives the 4 speeches as it is. It tells you beautifully and in simple words what actually is the thought which makes up for that integral humanism. It's fairly simple read. I request each one of you, with the benefit of having attended these 2-day seminars, if you read them, you will understand how, whether it was former Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji, or whether it is the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, every government policy under these 2 eminent leadership has been very reflective of integral humanism. So I will certainly highlight, as I'm talking about the integral humanism aspects, to link it with what government is doing. So it is a particularly powerful philosophical framework, a philosophical framework which is completely Indian. And this was, after all, in early parts of our India's independence, 1964, 65, 64, actually in the name of principles and policies, Bharatiya Jansangh, which met in Vijayawada, this integral humanism idea was infused in the policy, principles and policy paper, which in the Bharatiya Jansangh meet in Vijayawada 1964, I think it was January, they accepted it as the foundational philosophy with which Bharatiya Janasangh and now we, coming from Bharatiya Janasangh, are fully committed to. So it will be of very significant importance for all of us to please read and familiarize ourselves with this. And I would appeal to each one of you all. And I'm very grateful for the organizers for having taken this topic up in the 60th anniversary of the 4-day lecture that Panditji had given in Mumbai. It is our duty to understand what our party's ideology is and how in every action of ours we have to reflect it. And therefore this very important seminar, I think those of you all are here, are immensely blessed to have such concrete, comprehensive discussion on this topic. I'll probably go a bit forward and backward, so I'm not giving you a flow of speech, but because every time linking up with integral humanism, I want to highlight the fact, and Sri Shankaranandji also emphasized, that body, mind, intellect, and soul make up for every human being or every creature. And therefore, when integral humanism is being talked about, it is to recognize that these four will have to be in balance. You cannot be too ambitious or too avaricious that you end being an imbalanced individual, because when you do things beyond the framework of dharma, which is what was emphasized by the previous speaker, there will be an imbalance. And it is that imbalance which causes disruption to any system. Why did communism fail? Why did complete capitalism fail? The emphasis was so distorted. Capitalism was so driven by personal consumption, earn more, consume more, save more, spend more, and repeatedly going on excessive levels of consumption, thereby without having any balance which will bring in sustainability. When you cross limits of sustainability, you end up having exploitative approach to exploiting the natural resources, whether it is water, whether today it is critical minerals. There is just no end to the level of exploitation. And therefore, whether it is capitalism or whether it is state capitalism, as it is called, the communism. Because in 1964, when Panditji was speaking about what exactly will determine our economic philosophy, these were the two dominant forces. Communism coming from USSR and somewhat coming also from China, but China was of less significance in those days. It was more USSR. And capitalism coming from the United States of America or the Western European countries, who were imperial forces. You'll obviously go back to reading about Lokmanya Tilak and others who will tell you what happened during imperialist days, when resources were taken away from countries like India, going off to the imperial capitals. So this asantulan, the imbalance, is dominant in communism. It's dominant also in capitalism. So what does Pandit Deen Dayal suggest for us? He says there has to be an alternative model, which is a decentralized economy. It cannot be that there is a government which is so aggrandized that exploitation happens, monopoly is driven. We cannot take that. So the individual who lives with ethics, who lives within the framework of dharma, and the collection of individuals who live like that create the chiti for the nation. And it is that creation of that chiti for the nation, if invoked right, if invoked with the right level of energy. What is that energy which Panditji refers to as Virat, but that is the collective force with which you are able to lead the world for an alternative between communism and capitalism, both of which are exploitative, and that is not suitable for India. That's the basis of Pandit Deendayal Upadhyayji's narrative. So I won't go further into detailing, but I just want to underline that he wanted the last person down at the level of the system's bottommost level to be kept in the mind for all of us to plan, so that it is he who has to be lifted up, and he has to be lifted up with dignity intact. Pandit Deendayal Upadhyaya, talking at that time, kept repeating that the dignity of every individual is important. I would want to keep the context at the back. We should not forget it. India, at that time, under the leadership of Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, adopted a model for India, which we in India call it as Mahalanobis model, which is nothing but the USSR model of development. What was the USSR model of development? Intensively invest in capital-intensive industries, big industries, and you will be able to produce enough for the economy, and even if there's surplus, we can produce it and sell it. So, Mahalanobis model coming from USSR, which is so driven by capital-intensive industries, was the model adopted. Deendayalji argues that that's the most inappropriate model for India. Why? Because for centuries, India has always been led by small entrepreneurs, small businesses, and we are a labor-intensive country, then and now. And therefore, you need a model which will have labor-intensive industry, and by nature, and also thanks to the colonial rule, imperial rule, we are left with no capital, not so much money to invest. So can we have a system which is capital intensive? No. And if you have a capital intensive system, where will the money come from? As a result, the mechanized capital intensive sectors growing in the industry led to intense, massive unemployment. So Pandit Deendayalji clearly said, look, I have 6 principles to say, or 6 objectives for any economy. I'm not going to read each one of them. The third one underlines that we should work towards full employment. The third is full employment. The first 2 are going to be influenced once you have everybody doing something productive. The first 2 relate to standard of living, good quality of life. And even in the first, he adds up, priority be given for national defense. I was glad when I was coming, before coming into this hall, I saw the exhibition. Such wonderful displays of India's defense capacity. Very well done. And Prime Minister Modi, since 2014, has been emphasizing on Atmanirbharta in defense production. How with foresight you are able to draw from the learning that you have from the integral humanism. The first priority of the 6 objectives given by Pandit Deendayalji is to take care of standard of living of people, but equally provide for national defense. Which is what we've done, and that is why your Operation Sindoor could have so many equipments. As opposed to a government which said, I don't have the money to spend on defense procurement. We had money then, we have money now. Then that money didn't go for defense. Whereas now, in the last 10, 11 years, we have spent on defense procurement from indigenously manufactured goods, and therefore today, of course, we have also brought in some highly technical equipments from outside. A combination of all that is today protecting India. You saw that. So, this Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, Sabka Prayas is exactly what you do when you're dealing with the Antyodaya. If you have to lift everybody out of poverty, give them a certain level of employment, give them that kind of standard of living. If you lift people from poverty, you are giving them access to so many different fundamental basic necessities. As a result, they are above where they were before, and as a result, you see them accessing greater productive capacities, and therefore the production of the country goes up, and with that the standard of living goes up. So the 6 objectives which he says for an economy are all well ingrained in our policy today. So the work, wealth, and also well-being. I'll just spend a few minutes on that. I said even earlier that Pandit Deendayal Ji Upadhyaya wanted full employment, maximum access to employment, and I'm not going into the details of how we are providing employment now. You know, every month since October 2022, we are running camps, Rozgar Mela, in which PM comes and gives letters to people so that they get gainfully employed. We are also, through the banks, providing assistance to those startups and small industries. MSMEs have been given maximum attention and credit. So creating jobs are from various different angles. So, Vyakti, to realize maximum potential, if you give him access to the opportunities with which he can skill himself, train himself, you're readying the youth of the country to be able to lift himself and his family out of the dire situation. So, work is not just for sustenance, but also it's a path towards dignity and also an opportunity and empowerment, which is very much the fundamental principle with which Pandit Deendayal Ji speaks. Second is integral well-being of work, at work, so that when the work culture improves, people are treated better, opportunities are given to them, promotional avenues are created, and when, like the situation during COVID, people were made to sit at home because there was a lockdown. Several people were under stress. They didn't know how long this is going to last. They didn't know what will happen at the end of the day. Mental stress became a very big factor for many of our full-time, part-time workers. Government made sure it had an online anonymity maintained counseling session for people who needed that kind of a help, because you need to be a sensitive society, give that dignity for everybody. It is very important to understand that when you talk of the economy, you talk also of factors of production. Because we learn it through the Marxian viewpoint, we only know 4 factors of production. We are constantly told that land, labor, capital are the only main things with which we have to work. What Pandit Deendayal Upadhyaya does is a very interesting 7 different factors which are important for employment reasons. He actually credits Professor Vishveshwaraya, who actually said all these 7, and takes it from there and says it is important for us to understand that all these 7 will have to be infused in our policy making. So what are those 7? He says every system of production should take into cognizance man, of course, money, material, management, motive, or the motive as power. What is the power motive? Market and machine. So he says there are 7 M's drawing from Professor Vishveshwaraya, saying all these 7 will have to be well infused into your policy. If you're thinking of man, you cannot think of him without instruments to work. He needs money. And these machines which have to be with him will have to be very much tailored to India's need. That is why even then he spoke about Bharatiya technology. 64. He's already spoken about Bharatiya technology, clearly saying all those imported machines which come, get fitted, and after that we are rearranging our labor to suit that, rearranging the quantum of capital which we need to run it. So retrofitting was happening. He said, no, I need money, I need man, I need machine also, but that should all be in the framework of Bharatiya technology. And I'm happy to say, in today's context, even artificial intelligence, Government of India is looking at it from the Indian dimension. And that is why you have large language models being created in India to suit Indian industry or society. And of course, you would have heard that Sanskrit has been recognized all over the world as the language most suited for these kind of activities, coding inclusive. So the emphasis that we are giving in India towards technology which can be so tailored for our requirements is reflective of what Pandit Deendayal ji had said, Bharatiya technology. Unless you have that, you will never be able to have our workers feeling comfortable to handle and the larger picture to be understood. There are, of course, very many anecdotes with which a lot of people have spoken about Pandit Deendayal Upadhyaya as to how it is important, like for a man who creates small kullad or potter. He deals with the clay, he mixes the clay, he makes it soft, he also then sits at the machine and then creates that vastu, whichever it is, a kullad or a pot or anything. So from A to Z of his business, he has his hands-on experience and he has a macro picture of how his product is going to go out. Whereas industrial societies constantly looked at only man as a cog in the wheel. The larger wheel moves, but he's only one spoke within that. So his business is just to do that bit and not look at the whole thing, which itself is a contradictory view of other isms, communism, socialism, and everything else. Whereas in India, every individual contributes to himself, his family, his community, his society, his village, and as a result, the larger Chiti, which is India as a nation, feels as one. And that is where I strongly believe that we constantly will have to go back to Pandit Deendayal ji's philosophy and understand why we cannot be an individual consumption-driven India. We have, as a nation, a role to play, which is what we did during COVID. We took care of our neighbors. We ensured that they get medicines. We took care of the country. The nation was readying itself with vaccine, which was distributed free for all our citizens. So the Chiti is fully awakened. It shouldn't be fully awakened only when there is an emergency. We have to build within ourselves such capabilities so that we realize our potential and keep the Chiti awakened always. The feeling of nation should be awakened always. And therefore, I don't need to say, in the context framed by Dharma on one side and Moksha on the other side, wealth creation has never been a taboo in India. We promoted wealth creation. We would want wealth creation. And that is why entrepreneurs in India under Prime Minister Modi, we refer to them as wealth creators. They are not thieves. Whereas what the socialism did, or communism did, was to look down wealth creating activities. They were treated as chores. You're making profit. Profit was a bad word. Whereas that's not what we believe in. We would like to have profit created by genuine ethical practices, and that is what is going to create wealth for the nation. And once you have wealth, you give dignity of labor, you provide for education, you provide for skilling, and you lift the tempo, the spirit of the nation. And these are important for the Virat, energizing efforts of the nation. So I think it's very important for us to recognize that. And there is one other angle which I would like to, just as he spoke about Bharatiya technology, the other one thing in 1964, I'm very, enthused to say this. We all talk about startups, massive disruption, we need disruption, good disruption is doing good for the country and so on. But the first voice, if I can say so, to disrupt the status quo came from Pandit Deendayal Upadhyay ji. He says, discard the status quo. Discard the status quo. That mentality that, it's all right, it's going all right, usko kuch nahi karna. Nahi, usko discard karo. You need to disrupt the status quo so that you are able to build a nation which will not only protect our culture, but also take us further towards a newer, conscious society. I just want to read this one line from Pandit Deendayal ji himself. I quote, he says, our goal is not merely to protect the culture. Our goal is not merely to protect the culture, but to revitalize it so as to make it dynamic and in tune with the times. We must ensure that our nation stands firm on this foundation and our society is enabled to live a healthy, progressive, and purposeful life, unquote. So, he goes on to then say, you can acquire strength only with exercise and hard work. Therefore, we shall have to discard the status quo mentality. Disruptionist, Pandit Deendayal Upadhyaya. We wouldn't have believed it, but for in this connection, in the context of the seminar, all of us going back to read more about Pandit Deendayal Upadhyaya ji. So, he says, I continue the quote, therefore, we shall have to discard the status quo mentality and usher in new era, which is what I thought Prime Minister Modi has been doing, new India, towards a Vikasit Bharat. And in budget 2025, 1st February 2025, we defined what Vikasit Bharat is. And in that, employment, and particularly for women, was high priority. That is what we imagine. That is one of the things we imagine for Vikasit Bharat. So, indeed, therefore, Deendayal ji says, indeed, our efforts of reconstruction need not be clouded by prejudice or disregard for all that is inherited from the past. It need not be clouded, unquote. So, with this, it is very obvious that that desire to disrupt the status quo mentality was identified as an important quality for Bharatiyata to come back. So that whether you're using our technology, which we create for ourselves, whether you create wealth, whether you are very clear that you want to have India become powerful as a nation, defense protected and so on, you need to be a disruptionist in a way. Disruption for the status quo mentality, not otherwise, as would, let us say, extreme leftists would see. Disruption means be iconoclastic, fight with the state. No, not that. Your mentality, which is status quoist, should be changed. I won't take more time. I think a few more minutes to highlight how in providing an alternative, no USSR model of communism, no USA model of capitalism, imperialism anyway is rejected. So what is it? He very clearly says, look, I am not giving any isms. I am not giving any isms at all. But I will certainly give you an alternative. And in providing that decentralization and Swadeshi, Pandit Upadhyaya has very clearly, repeatedly recognized one issue. And that issue is ecological balance. I told you that the strand of criticism against communism was excessive consumption. Against capitalism, it was excessive exploitation of natural resources. So he's giving you a third alternative. And that third alternative is Swadeshi and decentralization. And in doing that, he very clearly says, unless we support such activities which will recognize ecological balance, meaning use sustainably, don't exploit nature, you're part of this larger scheme of things, so you cannot be greedy to finish it all off in this generation, leave nothing for the next generation. He supports policies which are ecologically balancing. Therefore, sustainable wealth creation under Prime Minister Modi has been emphasizing on circular economy, which is very core to our belief. And in that process, also making sure that if we follow circularity in our policies, it has a potential to nearly provide 11% of our GDP as savings by the year 2030. 11% of our GDP will be in the form of savings if only we use the circularity principle, use, reuse, recycle. You follow that principle for ecological balance, then it is 11% saving of your GDP itself. So that is the kind of emphasis, keeping in alignment with what Pandit Deendayal ji has said. So you know that the Prime Minister has introduced life as a mission, meaning livelihood for, lifestyle for environment. Change the way you live so that you're far more environmentally aligned. Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, renewable energy push that we are giving. 46.8% renewable energy capacity is being established already, and respect for creation is certainly part of our government's policy. And also for people first, which is part of the topic that you wanted me to speak, the PM Jan Arogya Yojana, Ayushman Arogya Mandir, and all these have reached 55 crore beneficiaries. 36 plus crore cards have been given for Ayushman Bharat, and 1.75 lakh Ayushman Arogya Mandirs have been established. There are Poshan Abhiyan, which are covering 42.2 crore school level nutrition, and also non-communicable diseases are also being identified and treatments are being provided. You know the health tech area is also very big in terms of e-Sanjeevani, 31 plus crore teleconsultations are happening. You win as a digital vaccination portal. ABDM, which is 70 plus crore for Abha, and also drone medical deliveries happening as medicines in the sky are all our government's priority. So in conclusion, I would say Ekatma Manav Darshan is so relevant even for today, and it is setting the path for us to lead 2047 Vikasit Bharat. So it's not 1964, it is relevant for your 2047 Vikasit Bharat as well. So I would humbly appeal to everyone who has attended this session and also in the morning and tomorrow to please spend some time to read what Pandit Deen Dayal ji said. There are any number of books, eminent scholars have written about it. It is important for us as Karyakarta to know what Pandit ji has given us. It's a wealth of information, relevant, I would say, till 2047. Dhanyavad.